Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're pulling a file off the shelf that sounds, at first blush anyway, like it belongs in a herpetology textbook. We are talking about the Hiss Act.
It definitely has a very distinct serpentine ring to it.
Yeah.
But unless you consider the maneuvering of 1950s congressional hearings to be snake-like behavior.
Which, honestly is a toss-up, depending on who you ask about Congress.
Fair point.
Yeah.
But strictly speaking, there are no actual reptiles involved today.
All right. We aren't here for biology. We're here to talk about a piece of legislation from 1954. It's officially known as Public Law 769. And looking at this stack of research you've pulled together, I mean, we've got the legislative history, court rulings from the 70s, right up to a National Taxpayers Union report from 2022. It is a wild ride.
It really is. And the reason we're dedicating an entire deep dive to this obscure law is that it's the perfect case study in what I like to call legislative rage.
Legislative rage.
Exactly. We tend to think of laws as these cool, calculated decisions made in marble rooms by people thinking about the next century. But the Hiss Act is what happens when Congress gets furious at one specific person, tries to build a legal weapon to destroy them, and ends up
accidentally blowing up the retirement plans of thousands of innocent bystanders.
Precisely. It's a classic case of unintended consequences. We are going to trace how a law designed to crush a Soviet spy named Alger Hiss somehow ended up targeting postmen for petty theft, stripping pensions from World War II veterans, and then, in a twist that feels like it was written by a screenwriter, completely failing to hurt the spy it was named after.
And then, just to twist the knife a little more, we'll look at why, even today, despite all the tough talk we hear about stripping pensions from corrupt politicians, the system is surprisingly bad at actually doing it.
It's a journey from the Red Scare right up to the modern era. It reveals a lot about the gap between passing a law to make a statement and passing a law that actually functions in the real world.
So let's start with the namesake, the target on the bullseye, Alger Hiss. For the listeners who might not be steeped in Cold War lore, we need to set the scene. Who was this guy, and why did Congress hate him enough to write a law specifically for him?
You have to understand, Alger Hiss wasn't just some low-level clerk. He was the golden boy of the American establishment. He was a high-ranking State Department official. He had been at the Yalta Conference with FDR.
Wow.
Yeah, he helped organize the founding of the United Nations.
So he's really in the room where it happens.
He essentially built the room where it happens.
Yeah.
But in the late 1940s, amidst the growing panic of the Cold War, he was accused of being a Soviet spy. It was the trial of the century. The whole nation was glued to it.
This is peak McCarthyism era. The Red Scare is ramping up.
Right. And while the government couldn't get him on treason due to statutes of limitations, they got him on perjury. In 1950, he was convicted on 2 counts of lying about his contacts with the Soviets. He goes to prison. But here is the detail that drove Congress absolutely insane.
The pension.
Yes. Because he had been a civil servant for so long, he was still eligible for his federal pension.
I can imagine that didn't sit well. The idea that tax dollars would fund the retirement of a man convicted of betraying the country?
It was politically intolerable. It looked weak. So in 1954, Congress decided to fix it. They drafted an amendment to the Civil Service Retirement Act, Public Law 769.
Which everyone just called the Hiss Act?
Correct. And the intent was surgical. They wanted to make sure that anyone convicted of crimes related to national security, or, and this was a big one at the time, anyone who pleaded the Fifth Amendment during those security investigations would be stripped of their pension.
So the message was clear. If you're a spy, or if you refuse to testify about being a spy, the government cuts off the check.
That was the pitch. And initially, it worked exactly as planned. The law passed on September 1st, 1954. The Treasury immediately stopped sending checks to Alger Hiss. Mission accomplished. The bad guy pays the price.
But this is where the legislative rage problem kicks in, because when you write a law in anger, you tend to cast the net wide to make sure the target doesn't slip through. You sent me the text of the act, and it lists job-related federal felonies. It doesn't just say treason.
No, and that is the fatal flaw. To ensure they caught Hiss and anyone vaguely like him, they broadened the language to include a whole host of felonies involving a breach of trust. The logic was, if you betray the public trust in any federal job, you don't deserve the public pension.
Which, on a bumper sticker sounds reasonable, no pensions for crooks, but in practice...
In practice, it was a total disaster. Between 1954 and 1961, the government started enforcing this law aggressively. And they weren't catching Soviet sleeper agents. They were catching mail carriers.
This was the part of the research that really surprised me. You have these cases of postal workers who maybe stole $5 from an envelope, or maybe they took a magazine from the mailroom.
Right. Now, we have to be clear. These are federal felonies. Tampering with the mail is a serious crime. You shouldn't do it. But we have to ask, is stealing $5 from a birthday card a national security threat?
Not exactly espionage.
Is it on the same level as selling state secrets to Moscow?
I think most reasonable people would say no. But under the Hiss Act, the penalty was mandatory.
Mandatory and automatic. It created this massive justice problem, as legal scholars call it. Let's paint a picture here. Imagine you're a judge in 1958. You have a postman in front of you who stole $10. You look at the case and say, okay, you broke the law. I'm going to give you a suspended sentence and a small fine.
Because you think you're giving him a slap on the wrist. The crime was minor.
Exactly. The judicial system is trying to be proportional. But the moment that conviction hits the books, the Hiss Act triggers administratively. The Civil Service Commission steps in and says, convicted of a job-related felony, pension gone.
So that $50 fine actually costs the postman his entire life savings. We're talking about an annuity worth tens of thousands of dollars back then. That's hundreds of thousands in today's money.
It effectively turned a minor theft into a life-ruining event. The punishment was completely disproportionate to the crime. And it wasn't just postmen. There was a report in the New York Times from June 1960 that highlighted an even uglier side of this.
Oh, right, the GI pensions.
Yes. The law was written so broadly that it was voiding pensions for veterans if they committed these breaches of trust while in the civil service. So now you have Congress, who wanted to look tough on communism, having to explain why they're stripping retirement benefits from World War II vets for minor offenses.
That is a political nightmare. You set out to hunt a wolf and you end up shooting the family dog.
That's a very apt analogy. And the pressure started to mount almost immediately. By 1959, you have hearings where Congress is basically saying, oops, we went too far.
It's rare to see Congress admit a mistake that quickly. Usually they double down.
Well, the optics were terrible. You can't really run for re-election on a platform of starving veterans. So in 1961, they passed a fix, Public Law 83-769. They amended the Hiss Act to restore benefits for employees involved in minor offenses not connected with national security.
Okay, so sanity prevails. They narrow the scope back to what they originally claimed they wanted, spies and traitors. If you steal a letter, you pay a fine, but you don't starve in your old age.
Correct. The balance was restored. The innocent, or at least the minorly guilty, were protected. The law was now focused solely on national security.
But here is the plot twist that I absolutely love. While Congress is scrambling to fix the law for the postman, the man who started it all, Alger Hiss, is sitting in the background plotting his comeback.
He was. And this brings us to 1972. Alger Hiss is out of prison. He's broke. And he decides to sue the U.S. government to get his pension back.
The audacity is incredible. I'm the guy you wrote the law for, but I want my money. But he wasn't arguing that he wasn't a spy, right? He wasn't relitigating the espionage charges.
No, and that's what makes this a fascinating legal case. This wasn't about guilt or innocence regarding the espionage. It was about the Constitution. Specifically, a clause that forbids ex post facto laws.
Latin for after the fact.
Exactly. The framers of the Constitution were very specific about this. The government cannot pass a law today that punishes you for something you did yesterday. If it wasn't illegal, or if the specific punishment wasn't established at the time you did the act, they can't retroactively apply it to you.
So let's map the timeline here. Hiss is convicted in 1950. The Hiss Act is passed in 1954.
You see the problem. When Hiss committed his crimes and when he was convicted, the penalty was prison. It was not loss of pension. That penalty didn't exist yet.
So the government effectively moved the goalposts after the game was over.
That's exactly how the court saw it. In the case Hiss v. Hampton, the suit was actually filed by the ACLU on behalf of Hiss and another plaintiff named Richard Strasburger. And the U.S. District Court ruled on March 3, 1972. They sided with Hiss. The Emergency Civil Liberties Committee hailed it as a massive victory. The court said that denying the pension was penal rather than regulatory.
Penal rather than regulatory. Break that distinction down for me, because that seems to be the pivot point.
It's crucial. If the government changes a regulation, say they change the retirement age for everyone moving forward, that's fine. That's just managing the workforce. But the court said this law was clearly designed to punish. It was a penalty. And because it's a penalty, it has to follow the strict rules of criminal law. And rule number one is you can't punish retroactively.
So because Congress was so eager to hurt Hiss specifically, they rushed a law that violated the Constitution, And because of that violation, Hiss got his money back.
He did. The government had to restore his pension with back pay.
That is just amazing. The irony is dripping off the page. The Hiss Act successfully hurt a bunch of random mail carriers for 7 years. But when it tried to touch Alger Hiss, it bounced right off the Constitution.
It's a powerful reminder that the Constitution protects everyone, even the people we designate as the bad guys. It's designed to stop exactly this kind of emotional, reactive legislation.
So Hiss gets paid, the postmen get their benefits restored. You'd think the Hiss Act would just fade away at this point. But it stays on the books, right?
Yeah.
Just without the retroactive part.
It does. It's still federal law. If you commit a treasonous act today, you'll lose your pension. But as we move into the modern era, we start to see how selective the application really is.
Let's fast forward to 1977. We have the case of Richard Helms, former director of the CIA, a titan of the intelligence community.
A very different figure from Alger Hiss, certainly in terms of public perception at the time.
But he gets into trouble. He pleads nolo contender, no contest, to 2 counts of misleading Congress. He lied to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee about CIA operations in Chile. Now, lying to Congress about national security operations, that feels like it lands squarely in the breach of trust territory the Hiss Act was supposed to cover.
You would certainly think so. It's a felony. It involves national security. But when it came time to decide on his pension, the Department of Justice issued a ruling saying the Hiss Act did not apply.
How did they justify that?
It came down to the specific statutes he was charged under and the technical definitions of national security offenses in the Act. They parsed the language very carefully. He kept his annuity.
So we have a pattern emerging. The law hammers the little guy, misses the specific target it was named after, and then gives a pass to the powerful CIA director.
It's not exactly a shining example of blind justice. And this double standard is what keeps bringing the Hiss Act back into the headlines. Every time a politician gets caught doing something terrible, the public asks, wait, do we still have to pay them?
Which brings us to a name that screams mid-2000s scandal. Duke Cunningham.
Duke Cunningham, U.S. representative, fighter pilot, and as it turned out, massively corrupt. In 2005, he pleaded guilty to taking millions in bribes. We're talking cash, yachts, antique furniture.
And naturally, people were furious. Why should a guy who sold his office for a yacht get a taxpayer pension?
Senator John Kerry jumped on this at the time. He introduced the Federal Pension Forfeiture Act, which everyone called the Duke Cunningham Act. The goal was to close the loopholes. They wanted to make it crystal clear that lawmakers convicted of official misconduct lose their pensions, period.
Because, correct me if I'm wrong, the original Hiss Act was a bit murky on whether it applied to Congress itself. It was mostly for civil servants.
It was ambiguous. Congress has a long history of writing strict laws for the executive branch while leaving a little wiggle room for themselves. Kerry wanted to shut that door.
So did the Duke Cunningham Act pass.
It died in committee.
I am shocked. Shocked, I tell you.
I know, stunning. But the public pressure didn't go away. The anger was real. So eventually, on September 12, 2013, Congress did pass an expansion. They extended the provisions of the Hiss Act to explicitly include members of Congress.
Okay, so 2013, we finally have a law. If a congressman commits a felony related to their job, they lose the pension. That's the rule.
That is the rule. And they've even tried to expand it further. In 2019, Senator Steve Daines proposed a bill to strip pensions from civil servants convicted of child molestation. This was following an investigation into an Indian Health Service pediatrician named Stanley Patrick Weber.
Which seems like the easiest yes vote in history. I mean, if we were taking pensions from postmen for stealing letters in the 50s, surely we can take them from a pediatrician convicted of that.
You would think.
Yeah.
But this brings us to the reality check portion of our deep dive. Because passing a law is one thing. Enforcing it, actually reaching into a bank account and stopping a check, is something else entirely.
This is the part that made me stop and reread the notes. You found a report from the National Taxpayers Union Foundation from 2022. They went looking for the bodies. They wanted to know how many congressional pensions had actually been stripped since that 2013 law passed.
And the answer is zero.
Zero.
As of that 2022 report, no congressional felons have lost their taxpayer-funded pension.
But we have definitely had Congress members convicted of crimes since 2013.
We absolutely have. But this goes back to the difference between performative legislation and practical application. The way these laws are written, there are so many off-ramps.
Like what? How do they get out of it?
Well, first, the conviction has to match the specific list of offenses perfectly. If they plead down to a lesser charge or a different charge that isn't on the list, they might keep the money. Then there's the appeals process. As long as you are appealing your conviction, you keep getting the check, and appeals can take years.
And let's be honest, pensions are property,
Wow.
legally speaking.
That is the core of it. Once you earn a pension, it is considered your property. It's deferred compensation. The courts are extremely hesitant to let the government seize property without an incredibly high bar of due process. It's hard to do.
So let's recap this wild trajectory. We started in 1954 with a law designed to destroy Alger Hiss. It failed to hurt Hiss because of the Constitution. It accidentally hurt innocent mail carriers and veterans. It was fixed to stop hurting them. It was expanded to supposedly hurt corrupt congressmen. And now, decades later, it's not hurting the congressman either.
That is a painfully accurate summary. The Hiss Act is essentially a ghost story at this point. It's a scary name that politicians invoke to show they are tough on corruption, but when you try to actually use it, it vanishes.
It feels like we keep trying to use the paycheck as a gavel. We have this instinct that justice means hitting them in the wallet.
It's a very common instinct. We equate financial loss with moral punishment. But the legal system separates those two things. Criminal law puts you in prison. Civil law handles money. When you try to mix them, when you try to use a pension fund as a tool for criminal justice, it gets messy.
And clearly ineffective.
It highlights the difference between passing a law to send a message versus how the law actually works in court. Congress loves the performance. We are stripping pensions. It sounds great in a press release. It wins votes. But the practical application involves the Constitution, property rights, and complex administrative codes. And usually, the practical realities grind the performative intent down to dust.
And maybe that's a good thing. Hearing about the postmen in the 50s, maybe it's better that the government finds it hard to seize people's livelihoods.
There is a strong argument for that. The procedural hurdles that protect a corrupt congressman are the exact same hurdles that protect the innocent civil servant. The Constitution is a blunt instrument. It protects the unpopular and the guilty just as much as the innocent.
Well, there you have it, the Hiss Act. A snake that bit the wrong people, lost its fangs when it tried to bite the right person, and is now sitting in the corner, largely toothless.
A perfect description.
It really makes you wonder, though. As you process all this, think about the broader implications. If a law named after a convicted spy couldn't even stop his pension because of the Constitution, what does that tell us about the real limits of congressional power? We tend to assume lawmakers can just legislate away bad behavior by threatening financial ruin. But if the Constitution walls off our property and our pensions from retroactive rage, we might need to rethink how we actually hold the powerful accountable, because clearly the paycheck isn't the silver bullet we thought it was.
It's a fascinating question to leave on.
Indeed. Thank you for walking us through that legal labyrinth. And to everyone listening, thanks for diving deep with us. We'll catch you on the next one.